Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity. Usually, at least once a week, we come before the House to talk about jobs, that little four-letter word that is so important on everybody's mind. Can I get a job? Will I have a job? What's it take to get a job in America? We still have far too high unemployment, and we still have a great need to make sure that our jobs produce the kind of wages and opportunities that Americans really want. They want to be able to buy a home, to have a car, raise their family, provide the necessities, see that their kids get a great education and opportunity. We've got a long way to go. We've come a long way, but we still have a ways to go. One of the critical ways in which America can and must build jobs is to build the infrastructure, to make sure that those foundations upon which the economy will grow, upon which cities will be built, those things that allow us to prosper, the critical investments, in this case the physical investments, are the issue we're going to talk about today. We have an opportunity. Beginning tomorrow, a conference committee will be formed here in the Capitol, made up of senators, Republican and Democrat, and members of the House of Representatives, both Republican and Democrat, sitting down together, together, actually, at the same table, tomorrow morning, 9:30, to begin a conference committee on the Water Resource Development Act, otherwise known as WRRDA. If you're around here long enough, you know what that means, but I guess the rest of the world really needs to know that it's the Water Resource Reform Development Act. And so, 13 million jobs. 13 million jobs in America depend upon how well that conference committee does its work. House of Representatives a few weeks back put out its version of the bill. The Senate did several months ago. Senator Barbara Boxer from the state of California, my colleague, will be chairing that committee. And we have work to do. We have the task of making sure that 13 million American jobs that depend upon the Water Resource Reform and Development Act will be secure. It's a big one. So what's involved in the Water Resource Development Act? Well, how about this? 99% of America's international trade travels through our ports and waterways. That's a big number. I suppose there's some 1% that travels on airplanes, and those are probably very high-ticket, high-priced items. But if you're talking about the great, almost the entire majority of America's work goes through our ports and waterways. And this is what Water Resource Reform and Development Act is all about. It's about our ports, the great ports of America. It's about the waterways of America. It's about the locks and the dams on the rivers. Let me put this up for just a second. An interesting map. I don't know if many Americans have really considered the map of the United States and the waters of the United States. Obviously, the coastline. We don't have Alaska on this map, but it should be there also. The Great Coast, the East Coast, the Gulf Coast, the Pacific Coast, and of course, on and around Alaska. But that's not all. Each of these rivers also is a waterway upon which commerce flows. And tomorrow, with the conference committee, the WRRDA bill, we will be discussing how to make these rivers more attuned to the environment and to commerce. On the Great Mississippi River, the Missouri, the Ohio and the Illinois River, and all the way up into Wisconsin, an enormous amount of America's commerce flows along those rivers. And joining me in just a few moments will be Representative Bill Enyart from the state of Illinois, and he'll be talking about some of these issues as they relate to that part of the world. But this great river system in the central part of America is the highway, the major highway of America. Oh, there are interstate roads, to be sure, and there are local and county roads, but most of them feed into this great system that moves up and down the Mississippi River. The Water Resource Development Act is all about that. It's all about that commerce on that great river and about whether the locks and the levees that are on that river are adequate to meet the needs of commerce and the needs of public protection. For those of us on the West Coast and the East Coast and even into the Gulf, it's about the ports. It's about the ports of America and whether those ports are adequate for the commerce that we need to have. And so when you happen to go by a port and you see one of these tied up at the dock, you can think about the American economy and about 99% of the international trade that goes in and out of our ports. It's a big deal. It is a very, very big deal. And most of America's ports are antiquated. They are the shoals, that is the mud and sand at the bottom of the ports has been accreted, that is built up over the last several years, and it needs constant dredging. And so part of what we'll be dealing with at the WRRDA Conference Committee is the dredging of the ports and quite possibly the shore side, what's going on there. These are subjects that we'll come to in the next few minutes as we talk more about how we can build jobs in America and simultaneously build the American economy by building the great infrastructure. One more issue I want to put up here before I call on Mr. Enyart is this one. You see all those rivers there? They're critically important. They're critically important for commerce and trade and obviously water and agriculture and all the rest. But sometimes, virtually every year, they're also a major problem for America. This happens to be a picture of a levee break on the Sacramento River system, which I happen to represent, 200 miles of the Sacramento River. This break is all too common across America. And so the Water Resource Development Act, which will be up tomorrow in the conference committee, not going to be finished, but at least it'll make some progress towards completion, will deal with the levees. The Army Corps of Engineers is the responsible federal agency for the maintenance of the rivers, for the waters of America, whether they are in the rivers or along the shore. They're responsible for the ports, that is for the maintenance of the ports, not the ports themselves. And in my district, the Army Corps of Engineers plays a major role in public safety because it's their responsibility to make sure these levees are adequate to the challenge of the flood. And when those levees are not adequate, great damage is done across America. It's probably about $22.3 billion of annual unspent American treasure that is still in the pockets of America and the governments of America when these levees work. When they fail, a huge expense, floods, flood damage, and the like. I'd like now to call on my colleague, Mr. Enyart from Illinois, to share with us his view of the necessity for the Water Resource Reform Development Act and the way in which it protects and helps his district. So, Mr. Enyart, if you'll come up and join us.